We're on, are we?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome everybody. I'm going to be chairing today's meeting because Jason's isolating, and I believe we've had another apology from Nick Rain.
Councillor Rain, Chair, yes.
He's having to isolate this morning. But is there anybody else who should be here who isn't here? I don't believe there is.
Everyone else is here, Chair?
Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. Any declarations of interest? No? Okay. Can we quickly go through the minutes of the previous meeting? Does anybody have any points they want to raise or matters arising from it? It all looks pretty much as it was, as I remember it, so we agree that those are a correct record of the meeting. Excellent. So we are moving on quite quickly then. Service delivery performance report. Craig, you're going to take us through this, yeah?
Yeah, well, actually, Area Manager Nick Sharman's going to take us through the report
Okay.
as service delivery. I suppose really just a bit of context. We're coming to the end of this current CRMP, IRMP. So this is really the last kind of report around performance, although the next one will pick up some of the last quarter of this as we move towards the new CRMP that members will have seen in terms of draft, but that'll be coming for February's Fire Authority, ready for 22-25. So it's really a bit of a reflection about how we're going. The general view from me is direction of travel the last 3 years in particular have been really positive, and hopefully the area managers, as they take you through the reports, will be able to back that up as well. So if I can, Chair, over to Area Manager Sharman.
Yes.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. If we can just take you through the report, I'll point out the more pertinent, more significant areas of the report. Starting on page 10, the incident profile for the number of incidents that we have attended this year remains very similar to previous years. There's nothing significant standing out, with the exception of the bottom of page 10. You can see there is a spike in incidents in early April and May. But members will be aware that we've previously discussed the spike in incidents, and further analysis, which is broken down at the top of page 11, shows what we've previously reported, that the spike in incidents was due to an increase in deliberate secondary fires, and that was due to, if you remember, particularly warm weather and activities post-COVID lockdown and experiences that we had, particularly in the Mansfield area of the county. That is correlated further by a breakdown, further analysis at the bottom of page 11, which looks at incidents per category as they are in terms of how they pose risk. We have three categories: P1, P2 and P3. P1 being incident that pose immediate threat to life. P2 is serious hazard or high risk to properties, and P3 it has the potential to life. As you can see, P3 in the quarter 1 and 2, this is on the graph at page 11, basically confirms that we had those spiking incidents, and whilst we treated them very seriously, they were at the lower end of the more serious incidents that we often deal with. Turning over to page 12, at 2.3, paragraph 2.3, the data within this paragraph is around about, it refers to how we meet our official attendance times. Within the strategic plan, we set an average attendance time of 8 minutes, and it's pleasing to report year to date, this was within December, that we are currently achieving those attendance times. We're currently achieving 7 minutes and 59, and you'll see from the graph in 2.3 that it does fluctuate whether we achieve it or not, and there are always pinch points throughout the year where it becomes more challenging, whether that's to do with the volume of calls, whether that's to do with the availability of on-call appliances, but it's really pleasing overall to say that we are achieving the standard that we've communicated to the community of Nottinghamshire. 2.4, this is an addition to the previous reports. What this is active incident monitoring. And the reason that we've included this is to make members aware that we take our we're very committed to being a learning organisation, and what active incident monitoring means is that we ensure that we have an appropriate command structure at operational incidents, and we put a structure in place that we're always learning from operational incidents. So we make a commitment to actively monitor 10% of all operational incidents. What that means is that not only do we send the initial attendance, whether that be a fire appliance or whatever we deemed appropriate, but we would send additional support generally through an officer to monitor and make sure that the incidents are being conducted in the correct way. And we can always learn from those lessons, so we can become a learning organisation and continue to improve our performance. On page 13, on-call availability, 2.5. The service has a target of 85% as an average for on-call availability across the board. We're currently at 84%, which was slightly below the requirement where we need to be. 10 of 16 sections achieve the target, but we have a few where we constantly challenged in terms of their availability. Sections such as Southwell, as I've reported before, and it was covered in more detail at the last report, is where we experience these challenges. But we continue to work hard to recruit and improve that levels of availability. There are some exceptional performing on-call stations. For this period of time, Warsop was the top of the tree at 97% availability, which in terms of a commitment for the local community is absolutely outstanding. In terms of the graph at the bottom of page 13, that shows our performance over the past 5 quarters, and it gives confidence that it's pretty consistent. We do see fluctuations, and we do see seasonal fluctuations as you would expect. But it's really pleasing to report that we are consistent, but we never take for granted on-call availability, and it's an ongoing challenge that we clearly focus on. At the request of members some time ago now, we report the availability of Ashfield and Retford separately, and that's detailed in 2.6. Ashfield, they're on the up. The availability is improving. It can be a challenge within Ashfield, and it did have some significant setbacks with some key personnel leaving. But we're on the up, and availability is at 77%. But what's really pleasing is Retford were in a similar period to what I believe Ashfield are 2 years ago. And Retford have gone from strength to strength under the new leadership that they've got up there from some key personnel, and now reporting 86%. So it's good availability there. From 2.7 and all the way through to page 15, the reports and the data highlighted in the report is around about how we maintain our performance and relationship with joint control, which is based in Ascot Drive in Derby. And we set 3 key performance indicators. That's calls answered within 7 seconds. That's calls that are handled, i.e. from the time of receiving the call to the time that they mobilise an appliance, of 89 seconds. That's for our most severe calls. And we also monitor the availability of the system. The call answered within 7 seconds and the mobilising within 89 seconds is consistent with the standards that we require. The mobilisation system availability is not where we want it to be. We set a high target because there is, as you can appreciate, it's of critical importance that we get good availability from the system. Currently, it's not achieving what we want to achieve. In December, there was a full hardware upgrade to lots of the parts of the system to try and address some of the concerns that we've had working with our partners, Sistel. There's a further software upgrade that is planned in the near future, and we're hoping that a clear focus in the performance of the system will address those concerns. But just to give members the assurance, it's a clear focus, and we put a lot of dedicated time into ensuring the availability of the system. Exercises continue. That's where we continue our preparedness for operational incidents. It's really pleasing to see, and it's been recently validated by the HMIC FRS inspection that we are achieving well above average in comparison to many other fire and rescue services. So that's really pleasing to say. Chair, would you like me to pause there before I go on to the next section, which is COVID partnership?
Does anybody have any questions so far? Anything they want greater detail on? No? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just turning to page 13, back to sort of the on-call availability. If I may probe a little bit further around Southwall.
Yes.
Is that sort of a long-term challenge? Is that sort of down to sort of recruitment and the geography of Southwall?
Yeah, it's traditionally because of the level of affluence within Southwell, attracting individuals to do additional, almost you could perceive it as part-time additional work, is an ongoing challenge, and we've put a lot of time and effort, and we do support Southwell by putting additional resources in there to try and bring up its availability, but the long-term recruitment is an ongoing challenge.
Thank you.
And just think on that one, Councillor, I think community-wise, I think probably the only thing that we can sort of carry on doing is try and keep raising the profile and communicate with the community.
Absolutely.
In terms of tapping into their spirit to want to do it, you know, in terms of a sense of volunteerism and those kind of things. But it's been something I think probably the last 15 years has been particularly challenging, and I think projections are it's going to continue to be so. I think we've been very clear to authority, and the authority has been clear outside of the service as well, that it's a national problem on call. The concern is, of course, if that carries on and volunteerism across all the sections becomes an issue or grows, you've got some there which is amazing, 5% unavailability. When you think these people have got other commitments and families and friends that they do, it's incredibly exceptional. We've got 18 of your 30 fire engines, your standards are on call, you know, at night in particular, and 16 in the day. And then when it gets to summer and people going on holiday, that then reduces even further. So it's a real challenge. What I would sort of say, the operational demand on a normal day is for about 6 appliances at its peak in the day. Of course, we get the large incidents that are well publicised that take 20 appliances, but they are few and far between, and we've got incredibly good mutual assistance from surrounding fire services as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, I mean, maybe a bit of an explanation, because the number is quite honest about the false alarms.
Yeah.
Maybe just to explain how that fits in with everything and what we know about it in terms of how much of it is deliberate, how much of it is just, you know, monitoring and slight drop.
Yeah, of course.
And what other actions are taken to try and minimise that?
Yeah, the actual number of false alarms is actually reduced this year on last year, but it continues to be a high percentage of the incidents that we attend. It's still constant, around about 40% of the incidents that we attend. And quite interestingly, that out of those 40%, there is a small number of premises that do the majority of those incidents. And they are generally the city hospitals, and the prisons, and other community-based hospitals and sort of that sort of clinical kind of settings. We continue to work with the responsible persons for the premises to reduce down those activities with some success. And we've also, my colleague Brent, they've recently done a review of our policy around that, so we can further drive it down, so we can be more challenging at the time of the incidents that we receive. But the key to it is education, and we work very closely with the responsible person at these sites to educate them. And I think importantly, we do a false alarm. We try and educate individuals so we get the correct information at the time of that call. There is always complications in terms of that when you receive a false alarm, you generally don't always receive it from the premise where the false alarm is. It goes through that secondary call centre, and It's about building that relationship up with the call centre so we can appropriately challenge the information, so we get more robust and confident in the information that is passed to us, so we can send the right resources. Because as you very much would appreciate, the critical infrastructure that these particular premises provide is significant. So it's an ongoing education, and it's an ongoing focus. Additional to the education is Bryn's team work very hard in terms of dealing with repeat offenders, and through the ongoing monitoring, there isn't many repeat offenders, but the fire protection team do follow it up. They do offer advice, they offer support, and ultimately, if that advice and support is not taken on board, we will move through the enforcement legislation available to us.
If we just add to that, in terms of that, Mick's quite right, in terms of repeat offenders, if they have 3 strikes, our fire safety inspectors will go and carry out an audit because we're suspecting there's something wrong with the management of that premises. And if the fire alarm system's wrong, then perhaps there's other fire safety measures that are wrong as well. So they do get an inspector go around, we do a full audit, we'll work with them in terms of their compliance to make sure that they're compliant. But again, it is mainly the hospitals which are the significant figures. We have a quarterly meeting with all the university hospitals and Kingsmill and Bassetlaw Hospital. But if you can imagine Queen's Medical Centre, how many detectors, automatic detectors, are across such a complicated building with very vulnerable people in it, at the most vulnerable at any point in their life. There is a balance between we want to know if there is potentially a fire in the Queen's Medical Centre or Nottingham City Hospital, balanced against a false alarm. We work really, really closely with them, and they are looking at implementing new fire alarm systems across the university hospitals, which should reduce some of that. But I think we need an acceptance that there is going to be a level. We're always going to get false alarms from these buildings due to the complexity, due to the nature of them. And that's what we're here for, as that safeguard to society, really, just to make sure it doesn't happen.
And there's a couple of things, Chair. There's that when we went to joint control, we looked to adopt an approach to unwanted fire signals collectively across the 3. From that point, I think we've gone down by about 30%. So in the last 3 years, we've driven down the unwanted fire signals by about 30%. There is going to be a task and something probably coming to this committee in the near future about how we develop that further. So there are some premises that receive more than 1 fire appliance goes to that unwanted fire signal. So is the appetite, and do we think the risk is such that we can actually reduce that number further? Some services, in terms of applying national guidance, don't attend unwanted fire signals to certain premises unless it's backed up by a 3 lines call. And that might be something about reducing things. And that'll have to be balanced on the risk that we think we face. As Bryn's just said there, equally so, that is time we could be spent doing other things, home safety checks, more business safety checks with crews. So we're going to have to balance the prevention protection with what the risk is to that premises. But there are clearly some premises that I wouldn't certainly be recommending to you as your Deputy Chief Fire Officer that we move away from. So it might be care homes down a lane that we have concerns for. The bigger hospitals with big management teams with big budgets are probably less of a risk, actually, notwithstanding what Bryn said about the numbers of people that are actually in them. So that is something we'll keep under close review and bring back to members.
So, I understand that, and I think that makes complete sense. I suppose a question would be that 40% number. Is there a sense of wanting to know where to get that down to further? Is there work being done around that?
I think if the work and the conversations I have with the area managers for service delivery here, yes, I think we can bring that down further. I think we need to balance that about that risk, about how far we want to go, and what spotlight that might shine on the authority, particularly say people like the rep bodies who may think it's unsafe not to do that. And we'll work very closely with them as well about doing that. As I say, some of these hospitals have got very state-of-the-art alarm systems. They've got security on site. They've got nurses, doctors moving around the building all the time, as opposed to, say, some of the larger care homes that may have 1 person on duty at night but has got an alarm system. So we need to balance where that risk is. And I think if we can get it to site-specific risk, then I think we can be a bit more nuanced about how we do it. How much to come down? I suppose if you had a policy as you're not going to respond to these things at all, you'd take it to 0. But I think that's certainly not something that I'm informed enough at the moment to recommend that. But I actually think changing some of the mobilisation, some of the properties, balancing the risk, I certainly think we can reduce it further.
Okay, that's great. Anybody?
Just to sort of follow up on that, then, it's more for sort of a question for interest, really. So, if we were to go on that hypothetical situation that you got a false signal from the QMC, in the terms of resources, what sort of, on average, would that take up to go and
Currently
check?
2 fire appliances, so one from Highfields if they're on station, one from West Bridgeford would attend that in its normal circumstances. If there was a smell of burning, or we thought that there was a fire at the Queen's Medical Centre, there'd be 4 appliances and an aerial ladder platform mobilised to that. But very much, if it's an unconfirmed fire, it would be 2 at present. Now, I've got my department doing some work to see if we can send 1 appliance. So, literally, we're halving our response to that because it's unconfirmed. And as the Deps just said, you know, in terms of that, it's an occupied building. It's got state-of-the-art fire alarm systems. There's security there. If there is any hint that it is a fire, we will send the full circus turnout. We will send 4 appliances, an officer, and an aerial ladder platform. If it is unconfirmed and we're thinking it's a false alarm, but we're not sure, we'll send 1 to check to make sure. And that process we're going through now, literally the meeting this morning with Queen's Medical Centre in the city, we'll be saying to them, we're looking at sending 1 in the future, not 2. Do you have any issues, any concerns with that managerially? But that's what we're going to do. And that's going to halve our response. And that other half of the response can do the safe and wells, can do the business safety checks that we want to do.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair?
Would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Section 2.9 is just pointing members to the fact that it's really pleasing that in response to the government's ask and in response to the National Fire Chiefs Council ask, the service responded as it has done previously and deployed members of staff to support the vaccination centres across the county. In total, since the report's been written, we sent originally additional 12 staff to the vaccination centres, but I'm sure members are aware that the vaccination centres demand is reducing, so we have returned a number of staff, and we have 5 staff that are continually to support the vaccinations, and 1 manager who's supporting the testing facilities across the county that are still out for support, which is really pleasing.
If I just on that, Chair, I read something from our own social media tweet. I think the authorities enabled us to do something like 14,500 hours of support, and something in excess of 80,000 vaccinations have been done by NFRS staff. And if I looked at that as a percentage last year of the whole of the UK fire service, we stand out really, really well. And that is probably something I'd like to go on record again to the staff that have been doing that. Not who's just have gone and done it, Chair, but the people internally that have enabled that as well. It's not just those putting the needle in the arm, it's everybody, and we continue to be very humbled and proud of the staff of the organisation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Moving on to the bottom of page 16, which is prevention. I won't do too much detail in terms of the activities there, because Bryn's got a dedicated paper to Safe and Wells at the request of members. Just to say that we are on track to achieve the target, but Bryn will talk more about that. 2.12 talks about DICE activities, which are data intelligence community events. You cover that as well. It's part of our proactive way of generating and providing support to our communities, but Bryn will cover that as well. The other thing that I will point out is that we've continued to support national prevention campaigns, and we've completed 45 to date as part of this current financial year, which is really pleasing. In terms of protection, I won't go over it in too much detail, but as members can see, within 2.16 just shows the general level of activity that we've undertaken and our constant strive to drive the level of productivity for protection. That is further outlined in section 2.17, which identifies a clear focus on protection teams to further develop and educate frontline firefighters so they are able to make a more active role as part of the auditing and enforcement process across the county. And that will further drive up, importantly, productivity, but more importantly, ensuring that the buildings across the county are safe for visitors and residents and people who work there. That's really pleasing to see. And then lastly is the Fire Protection Department continue to work with the City Council in terms of putting a clear focus in high-rise premises. The service was tasked by the National Fire Chiefs Council to undertake a review of its most high-risk residential properties. The service responded to that and has completed 120 high-rise residential property inspections, above 2 months ahead of schedule. The protection team have continued to review their working practices and their risk-based inspection programme, and have recently made amendments and changes to that we believe, and has been supported by the HMIC inspection recently, that it will enhance our service that we provide to our communities. And that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any further questions?
I suppose just as a bit of a look forward, Chair, as well, and members, the Fire Chiefs Council working nationally, there are some conversations taking place about the inclusion of more buildings over a particular height coming forward.
11 metres.
So those that are above 11 metres, because you may have heard that things about over 18 metres. If that is brought into the remit of the Fire and Rescue Service, that brings in hundreds of buildings in the city alone. And there is a real concern about how we deal with that. I suppose just to give you the reassurance, if you do pick up that messaging in your constituents, authorities, particularly yourselves, Chair, in the city, that is something we are aware of. We're trying to look at how we resource that if that comes our way. There's also something around the building safety regulation, around a new regulator coming in, and the likelihood that they'll be able to tap into Fire and Rescue Service resources to complete some elements of the fire elements of their wider remit. So that is something that there might be a draw on fire and rescue resources as well. And just to reiterate, fire protection is continuing to be a growing pressure and a growing demand for resources. That also means, of course, it takes about 2 years to get a fire safety inspector fully trained and qualified and competent. And bear in mind, there's 40 odd fire services who will want to do this, all challenging trying to do it, plus the private sector. I'm sure will be coming to the public sector saying, well, we can pay you a bit more money if you leave your public sector fire safety inspection job and come work with us. So it is a real area of growth, and really just to keep it in the spotlight, it is very much in our minds that this is something that's not going to go away. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can't see any desire to ask any more questions. Thank you, that was a pretty comprehensive report. Moving to safe and well visits.
Certainly. Thanks, Chair. Dovetailing really nicely into Mick's update, I'd just like to give you some information regarding our safe and well visits. I suppose just an overview. Our safe and well visits are probably the primary tool that we have in our prevention arsenal, really, to target those most risk of fire in the homes, really. So I'll just give you a bit of a breakdown, a bit of an overview of how we actually do that. I'm sure members will be aware, back in 2019, the HMI highlighted the fact that the service were completing less than 4,000 home safety checks or safe and well visits, and we were falling quite a bit short of the national target. There was also concern that we weren't targeting those most at risk of fire. So as you can imagine, there's been a renewed effort to improve the number of safe and well visits that we're conducting, and to make sure that we've got a robust approach to those that are most at risk. Safe and well, what we endeavour to do with as part of Safe and Well is to reduce the number of fire-related casualties, reduce the number of fires in the dwelling, but also it's from the health sector, making every contact count. If we're going across that threshold, we want to make sure that as a public body going across there, that we're the eyes and ears of other agencies, and we expect the same of them, really. So we do make referrals to other health authorities and other relevant authorities with the individual's permission to improve their lives, in essence, is what we're looking at. So if we look at 2.2, we're on track to deliver 13,250 safe and well visits this financial year. You know, and I'm sure your maths, it's over 200% increase in productivity. So a huge push by prevention and my colleagues in response there to get those numbers up. A real focus has been on delivering safe and wells. And as you can see there, we're now sort of above the national average in terms of the number of safe and well visits that we conduct per 1,000 population. You know, we're looking at 10.3 visits per 1,000 population, which is a really good news. In terms of safe and wells, we're looking at quality referrals for safe and wells. And if we look at 2.8, 51% of our safe and wells are from partner referrals, and these are our colleagues in health. They could be adult social care. They could be from the police. They could be anybody that comes into contact with vulnerable people. And there's quite a lot of work from the prevention department to make sure that we get those quality referrals. And it's an ongoing issue really, because if you can imagine of the churn within the adult social care, within health, we have to keep renewing this training on a very, very frequent basis. We just think we've done it and then we have to revisit it. And that's all predicated on the Charlie profile, which I'm sure you're familiar with. There's some posters laying around on the table here and at the back of this report. But Charlie is our targeted profile that we think, or we know, is the most at risk from fire. And that's the message that we're constantly pushing across to partners. And it results, as I say, 51% of all those are referrals. We get 13% from public, concerned family and friends of individuals. Can you have a look at my auntie? Can you have a look at my mum and dad? Yeah, absolutely, we go across there and have a look. But we also do at 2.10, 2.10, a data-led Safe and Wells, and as Mick has previously mentioned, DICE activities. Now this is data-led. So we use such things as data, Exeter data, mosaic profiling, indices of multiple deprivation, all those sort of data sources that we know make people more at risk of fire. So we may not be getting the partner referrals in these areas, but holistically we know that our fire crews are attending incidents in these areas. We know that there's areas of deprivation, so therefore we target those areas in terms of Safe and Wells. As I say, only 10%. What we find notionally is we get a few Safe and Wells from those areas, but far less than the quality partner referrals, which is where we're really pushing there. And 1% are those really high risk of fire. Unfortunately, they always seem to remain high risk of fire, whether that's through substance abuse, whether that's through mental health issues. They are really at risk of fire. And we work as part of a multi-agency approach to try and reduce that risk. But, you know, as with a lot of things in society, those people at most at risk remain most at risk. Some of these people are a perpetual issue for us and other agencies, really. We also look at reactive delivery of Safe and Wells. 25% of those are reactive. Community reassurance and engagement, career activities. These are following fires. So if there's been a fire on your street, you've seen fire appliances arrive, you've seen blue lights, you've seen smoke, you've probably a heightened awareness of fire safety at that point. And that is really what we're trying to tap into at that point in time. We're trying to get that emotion of that there's been a fire on their street, it could happen to them if you've got a smoke alarm fitted. And we will do that proactive door knocking at that time. Obviously, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, we'll go back at a reasonable time. But we really want to go on the emotion that there's been a fire in their community, an incident has happened, people are naturally inquisitive about what's happened, and we tap into that. You know, we don't give too much details away, but we make sure that we push that prevention message at that point, and that's quite successful, and we get quite a good hit ratio at that point because it's front and centre of the minds. In terms of quality, one of the things that HMI will ask, and it's certainly an ask that I've got of my department, we've got the Charlie profile, you know, we think we're right with that, and HMI have sort of asked us the same questions, but how do we know it's robust? How do we know it's valid? So last year we employed the services of Nottinghamshire University to do an academic evaluation of where we're at in terms of the Safe and Well. And reassuringly for me as head of the department, it came back as it's valid and robust of where we're targeting those resources in terms of Safe and Well. So we've got the academics to have a look at it, they looked at all the data, they looked at the outputs that we're doing, and they gave us broadly the thumbs up with that the Charlie profile is robust. Interestingly enough, the National Fire Chiefs Council that give us direction across the country are moving to a person-centred framework, which a person-centred framework in essence looks at the person in the house on those most at risk of fire. I rightly smile at that because we were doing it far before the National Fire Chiefs Council brought out the person-centred approach. It is in essence the Charlie profile that we've been doing for a number of years now. So that is a real credit to the department and the work that we've done over the last few years, that the rest of the country is now catching up with the person-centred approach. We also set a target that 80% at 2.17 of Safe and Well visits have got to be medium risk and above. It's initially when we started doing home safety checks, as they were back at the time, we were targeting anybody who wanted a free home smoke alarm fitting. We looked at it as operational crews and as response crews at the time. We thought the very little risk of this property being involved in fire. You know, it's not within the beyond possibility, but we knew that we probably weren't targeted in the right areas. Therefore, 80% of what we want now is medium risk and above. So there's those quality, most chance of having a fire within their domestic dwelling. And 84% of partner referrals are now medium risk or above, which shows that we're getting the message across to those partners. 2.18, the safe and well quality measures that are used by the Home Office and by HMI. Last year, 2020-2021, you can see the figures at 48.8% of safe and wells were for over 65s, 35% were those with a disability. Here in Nottinghamshire, we were above those national averages, 49% for over 65s and 50% respectively for disability. So we're well above the national average in terms of those at-risk groups. Like I said before, with the eyes and ears about making every contact count when we get across that threshold. So if we see something where we think another department ought to be involved, you can see the figures at 2.19. Things like smoking cessation, falls prevention, warmer homes, alcohol and drug dependency, telecare, all issues that we refer to other agencies, and general support. Being a helping service that we are, sometimes that these elderly, vulnerable people, they just want a hand around the house with something that we're there. Can you open this jar? Can you help us move this? And of course our crews do that, and that's warmly received by these individuals who, probably haven't seen anybody for 2 or 3 days while we're going to do a home safety check. So we take time and care and effort with those individuals. It's not just a very quick fit a smoke alarm, thanks very much, you're safe, and move on. The crews will spend valuable time with those individuals. We conducted if you see at 2.21, we conducted a quality impact assessment to make sure that we're covering all of the 9 protected characteristics, and that was only conducted in March 2021. So the quality impact assessment for Safe and Well in terms of age was positive for age. Since 2018, the figure's even higher, so it's 53.8% were delivered to over 65s. Which again is not surprising really. If you look at the Charlie profile, those are the people that are most at risk from fire over 65, so we're hitting that demographic. In terms of disability, again, was a positive impact. The figures I've just mentioned now, over 37% have been delivered of people with a disability. One of the concerns that we get, and you're probably aware that we've got an occupational therapist, is that disability is a big issue. We can fit a smoke alarm, and I've personally been to 2 instances that have been a fatal incident. Our smoke alarms have activated, but due to mobility, due to issues with the mobility of that individual, they can't respond to the smoke alarm. So we have currently got on secondments an occupational therapist to look at mobility issues and look at support we can get from wider health. So not only is the smoke alarm activated, they've got means in the house that they can actually get out of that property when the smoke alarm activates, and that's a really vital area that we're looking at, hand in hand with health really. We got a mixed review in terms of the quality impact against race. So, and again, that breaks down differently both in the city and county. So in the county, the EIA in terms of race was broadly representative white, black Afro-Caribbean, black British. However, there was a slight underrepresentation with multiple ethnic and Asian British. And again, in the city, we were positive representation in terms of white British, white Irish, Bangladeshi, black African, black Caribbean communities. But again, there was a slight underrepresentation in terms of Indian, Pakistani and Chinese communities. So that is something that we're looking to address in terms of, not say racially profiling, but we're looking at the ethnic mix, which we've not been asking those questions as part of Safe and Well. We are going to start in the future asking questions in terms of ethnicity when we go across the threshold into these homes. We're also looking at the data that's going to come from this census that we've recently done, because the data that we've got is from 2011. That said, the fire statistics, it is generally white, British, over 65, male, lives alone, known to adult social care, drinks and has got mobility issues, is at most risk of dying from fire. So in terms of risk, that is our risk category, that those individuals are sadly more likely to die from fire. And there are various social and demographic issues with that. Some of the ethnically diverse communities that live as part of extended families, they're at less risk because they've got younger people around, as opposed to the social isolation from over 65 white British male, which is a concern. So moving on, in terms of 2.29, in terms of customer satisfaction, we didn't undertake a customer satisfaction survey in 2020, 2021 because of COVID. However, in 2019-20, our survey said 100% of our Safe and Well customers were satisfied with our response. 99% found that it was useful, and 96 agreed that it made them feel safer in their homes. Figures I'm really, really proud of. You know, it's a really positive experience when you conduct a safe and well with these people. You know, you're warmly received. They're very appreciative when you leave, and it makes you proud to be part of the fire and rescue service when you're undertaking this work, and you are making a difference with it. So I hope that gives you a general theme of what we're doing with Safe and Wells. And Chair, I don't know if you want to ask any questions on that in terms of how we conduct ourselves.
Just a couple of points really, just to feed back more than anything. You may have recalled a few months ago, I think it was in the last quarter, in Clipston, there was quite an extensive, quite nasty house property fire. Obviously there was the Safe and Well follow-ups on that, and I just really wanted to sort of feed back that from speaking to residents post that incident, it was actually really well received.
Thank you.
The other one was with in early November with Nottinghamshire District Council on their Cleaner, Safer, Greener Action Day in Clipston. I think there was about 13 properties were found without smoke alarms, that sort of thing. And again, that was really warmly received, so thank you.
No, thank you. Much appreciated. I'll pass that on to the crews.
Yeah, if I can, Chair. I think there's some key messages out of what Bryn has covered there for members. When you look at where HMI said a couple of 3 years ago, 4,000 safe and well visits, and it was a clear view of mine with service delivery with colleagues here and the leadership, writing all the teams that was going to improve. I think we've demonstrated that we're starting to be a lot more efficient in the service and the productivity side of it. There is a challenge there about how much of one and if you do of your other, and I would refer members back to the unwanted fire signals. So if an appliance takes an hour to go to an unwanted fire signal, that could be a safe and well visit to somebody who's vulnerable in communities. So the balance across it. And I think what you're seeing as well is the changing face of the fire and rescue service. It's often been seen as, particularly where somebody wants to be a firefighter, they think, it's the rush into the incidents and those kind of things. And we are definitely a fire and rescue service that needs to have that balance of prevention, protection and response. One is neither more important than the other. It has to be in balance. The next CRMP as well, the target at the moment is for 15,000 safe and well visits per year. And that still keeps us, bear in mind the rest of the country is trying to up productivity as well. And certainly my view and HMI's feedback is they are saying that there's still some inefficiencies in the fire and rescue service model and how it delivers what it delivers. And that'll be a challenge that we'll have to bring back to authority and some decisions about where we go with that. But that is the kind of direction and reassurance really for members, and certainly my commitment is that is definitely where we will still be going. But all the foundations and things are absolutely really well. We're in a good position at the moment. And I guess really part of the reason the poster's been on the table and the report with the Charlie Matrix is for members to take away and share with colleagues within your own constituents. And if you do require any more information or resources, then we can certainly provide that to you, because you may find it useful in something like community centres or otherwise that may be useful for members. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. It was good. I know we tweeted out the 10,000 visit yesterday, so that's
that's
a
right.
good number to be
Yep.
moving on nicely. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, because, as you rightly highlighted, the inspectorate picked up on it, but I know everybody's involvement in this has been really helpful, because they've been really enjoyed it and actually feel like it's something that making a real change to what's going on. I also know, as I'm sure everybody else does, is they leave very positive impacts within communities. 100% satisfaction. Sounds a bit Eastern European to me, but I'll take it on this one.
We'll either accept it or suppress the rhetoric.
But in all seriousness, it doesn't surprise me, those numbers. The fire service is well regarded within communities. It enhances that. I appreciate all the work that particularly that's gone into the EIA analysis of it. I understand why there's some discrepancies within certain areas, and I'm sure we're keeping at it. And I know it's a risk-led process, but we need to make sure that all communities are benefiting from it. Not that I don't think they are at the moment. I just think you just need to get to 15,000 quicker.
Yeah, and I think just on the EIA, what it has shown is where we're, it's as Mick sort of said earlier about other things, a learning organisation. We've done the EIA to help us learn about what we're not doing. it identifies what we are doing well, because I think sometimes we beat ourselves up about the things we don't do. We're doing some great work. We know in terms of like Asian British and those areas, as Bryn has covered, we've got some work to do. But we also have our community engagement plan and our communications, and those things are coming together, you know, a lot more sort of, I guess, really research-led and pinpointing what the issues are. So I think we're being a bit more educated and a bit more informed about it. So it's another piece of work for the next 3 years to take it on and improve.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, just probably a random question, but with the rise of electric vehicles now, are we seeing any problems with, because you leave them unattended overnight to charge quite often, are we seeing any problems with that?
Yeah, I can pick that if it's okay, Chair. Yeah, there's an increase, and it's a focus nationally about how we deal with these cars. We're not seeing a significant increase in terms of incidents, but when an incident occurs, it creates different challenges. Because to put it simply, it is to put a fire out in an electrical car where you've got the ongoing energy created. It's very, very challenging. It's not like we would do for a normal, whether it's petrol or traditional car, where we can put, whether it's use water or foam, and it suppresses it. Because of the thermal runaway and the continual heating of it, it reignites, and it continues and continues and continues. And it does, and it's an area of growth, it's an area of concern, particularly if you get an electrical vehicle that's been charged or powered in an environment, whether it be a garage, whether it be you know, one of the worst things that we can think of, you know, if it was a number of electrical vehicles in a, you know, whether it be a car showroom or a carport, something like that, presents real challenges. We're working nationally and supporting trials of different methods of extinguishing these vehicles. We've recently demonstrated and led a seminar on education across the East Midlands about how we do that. And you know, you can Google them, and it's essentially putting a large blanket over it, a fireproof blanket, and Guy Martin's he's been on there, and you know, he's sort of saying this. So there is no solutions out there, and there is no intelligence as yet to say that it's increasing the number of fires that we attend, but we are very much aware of the severity that when they do catch fire.
It wasn't just the vehicle itself, I'm just thinking of the charging of it, because you
Yeah.
put it into electrical supply, you leave it on its own overnight,
Yeah.
unattended. Are we seeing any problems with that?
Not as yet.
Because obviously if the government do what they say, by 2030, you're going to have thousands of the streets just going to be littered with cables. And
Yeah.
One of the concerns we've got from a fire protection point of view is within the built environment. So if you think of a multi-storey car park, a electric powered car, the heat output from that, as Mick's just alluded to, is greatly increased from what it is from a fossil fuel vehicle. If you put those in a multi-storey car park times 10, times 100, times 150, times 200, you've got a huge intense fire. And again, we would have to look at the structural stability of those multi-storey car parks at that point, because they simply weren't designed for vehicles of that nature. And that is something that's, you know, is occupying our thoughts at this moment in time.
Just interesting thought on the horizon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with battery technology and the move to, you know, carbon neutral, there are some of the things about large storage battery dumps as well. They look like basically lorry ISO containers, and they are large dumps powered to increase capacity. And that is something that through the National Fire Chiefs Council as well, they're seeing it more in America, the fires. I've seen a presentation recently, but that is something they say through the Fire Chiefs Council. They are looking about future of demand and what that presents as issues to a fire and rescue service.
Interesting.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for the reports. Some really interesting information in it. So I'll call this meeting to a close then.